Grow and grow and grow. As will column B, we're tracking a closing rate. Maybe it's stock market, maybe it's some kind of futures market, some kind of number that's vital to our interests. And we want to track the information, and maybe we have been tracking it for not only months but for years, so column A could get quite long. And elsewhere, and not necessarily in the same worksheet, we always want to have the latest entry right here. And so if, for example, here, if the next entry is going to be the 10th here, and I'll just drag it this way, we'd like to see this be the 10th, and if the next number out here is going to be 267 or whatever, we want to see that right up here in cell E2, as we set up here on the screen, and it's not changing. Now, there's an unusual function, and I say unusual because, like certain kinds of functions, you might just gloss right over it if you happen to encounter it. It actually is part of the lookup and reference category of functions. And if you happen to click this button on the Formulas tab in the ribbon and come to Offset, you look at the description, it returns a reference to a range that is a given number of rows and columns from a given reference. And it's definitely programming-like in nature, and that certainly is insufficient in terms of explaining exactly what this does. And yet that's just what we need in situations like this. So instead of the manual entry here, let's put in a function that will, and this is going to be the offset function, of course, that will always keep track of the latest entry as they start to appear here in column A consecutively after the existing entries. Equal offset. Now, the reference is going to be to the cell starting in cell A1. How many rows down do we need to go? This is going to vary. If we put information in A9, we'll have more entries than we have there now, and obviously as we keep adding them, that's going to be the case. So what we need next is some way to count how many entries we have in column A. And some of you are familiar with the function count A, and just count A. That counts text entries in column A. And right away you're probably thinking, well, isn't that counting A1 as well? Yes, it is. That's all right. Subtract 1 to not count that. That's how many rows we want to move downward. And you're probably saying to yourself, what is the value of count A looking at column A? The value is 8. We subtract 1. And so we're looking at a 7. So what are we about to say here? From position A1, move down. How many rows? 7. How many columns do we move? To the right? None. 0. In other words, we don't want to move into cell A9. We essentially want to move into cell A8 and grab that data. And we see this. And a quick test of this, of course, is what if we do put in a different date after this? Immediately this is reacting. Now, once again, looking at the logic of this, what are we saying? We're always looking at A1 as the count of entries in column A goes up. That's 1 bigger than the offset that we need. For example, right now we need to go into cell A9 and pick up that value. This is telling us there are 9 entries. We want to subtract 1, so this moves down 8. And remember a nice shortcut too, when you're evaluating formulas, you can highlight a portion of it and simply hit F9 to see what that's equal to, and it really helps understand certain functions. So, of course, 9 might say would be 8. Move down 8 cells from A1, that would take us down to A9. Don't bother with the column. 0, we can even leave that off. And we don't want to hit Enter, just hit Escape to adjust it. And the same idea here. I could even copy this. If I drag it, it's going to copy the format. Another way, it might just copy this here. Right-click over here, do a paste special. Don't copy the format, but just the formulas over there into E. And this should be set up automatically too. And let's picking up the wrong, well, not exactly the wrong entry yet, because we don't have any number here. Let's put in a number down here. And now we see how that works. Now, you could say in a certain sense, this is a specialized function, but the use as it's seen here is the powerful one. If you do some exploring in various Excel help manuals, you will see the offset function being used for describing dynamic range names that might be worth looking into on your own. This is certainly one of the more powerful uses of it. At first it seems a little obscure, but It's easy to understand the more you look at it, and it certainly gets done what we need to get done. And this is going to work for a long, long time, particularly if you get a situation where you keep adding dates, keep adding information, column A, keep adding information, column B. It's always going to pick up the last entry. When you've got situations like this too, make sure you don't have empty cells in there, because then it's going to mess up the count. If you had only one, possibly you can make an adjustment and not subtract the one and somehow work around that, but here's the basic idea. This is the offset value right here, the number of rows to move downward, and the number of columns to move rightward. In some cases, like in this, not at all. It's not an issue. So a great tool when you need it, it's the offset function.